Welcome to lesson 5. Today we're going to talk about skip roundhouse kick and front leg roundhouse kick. So it'll be a combination of lesson 3 and 4. If you need a warm-up before we start, once again, it's going to be in the description below. Otherwise, let's break this down. So we talked about a lot of variations with skipping and with roundhouse kick. Today we're going to just stick with the snapping or linear roundhouse kick. And for our skipping motion, we'll stick with the more subtle variation. So we're not going to do a big feinting style, but instead a little bit more of a subtle skip, just a very small motion. This is all we need for today. And the reason why I'm opting for this style is because it's probably going to be the one that we use the most, because it lets us cover distance without giving too much of a visual cue to my opponent. Unless I'm feinting with my back leg, I don't really want my opponent to see this, because it can become a cue for them to respond and react and prepare a counterattack. So instead of showing this big motion, we're going to be a little bit more subtle in the way we cover that distance. So with skip roundhouse kick, we are doing something called an air pivot. We have our turning pivot that we saw in lesson 4, where we lift our chamber and on one leg we do our turn or pivot. We will talk about the planting pivot, where we place our turn on the ground before the chamber, like so. And then we have our jumping pivot or air pivot that happens while both feet are off the ground. With the skip roundhouse kick, I'm going to have my initial lift and jump, turn my hips, and land with that foot turned out. So the pivot happens in the air before I land. Another quick note as we're practicing this, make sure that we have enough internal rotation on the kicking leg so we have a nice horizontal or about horizontal strike. And let's make sure that when we pivot that this is rotated. If you find it difficult to get to that position, remember it is something that needs to be practiced and developed. The muscles involved in internal rotation are a lot smaller and they don't get trained as much as the bigger muscle groups, so they have to be practiced. So before we go into the smaller details, let's just practice that basic structure first. Okay, so step 1, we're going to just shift our way to the front leg and slight lift on the back leg. I don't want my feet to come close or touch my front leg. I just need it off the ground. So there should always be a little bit of space between your legs. So that's 1. 2, we're going to jump and switch legs like in lesson 3 we learned, but we're going to add the hip turn and land in our pivoted position. So we have 1, our lift. 2, we have our jump switch and pivot. 2. All right, and on 3, we're just going to snap. Pretty simple. Ready? 1, lift. 2, jump and turn. 3, snap. One more time, and then we'll try on the other side. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I'm going to switch legs and switch sides so you guys can see the front of my body. Ready? 1, 2, jump and turn. 3. Cool. So with the skip roundhouse kick, I'm going to just introduce 2 basic styles of doing it. One is a little bit more power-based, and one is a little bit more subtle. If you don't know what I mean by subtle, I mean more sneaky, less detectable. And so between these 2, there's a trade-off. And the trade-off is, do we want more power or do we want to be a little bit faster, a little bit less detectable? The more power-based style will be from an offensive stance, which means my hips are going to be more squared or forward-facing. You can see that when I change from a defensive stance to an offensive stance, when I square my hips, it kind of resets it for that hip turn. With the added motion of the hip swing, I have another place to generate power from. If I take away that step, I can get to my target a lot sooner, but of course I have less muscles involved and engaged in that motion, so less power. Once you practice the motion enough that it feels smooth and comfortable, we want to time the kick so that our landing and our extension happen at about the same time. So instead of having the motion drag like that, it'll seem a little bit more simultaneous, kind of like that. If this timing is kind of hard, it doesn't mean to jump higher. We do want to kick faster. It'll come with practice, so just keep drilling, it'll come. Okay, let's go back to the first leg and try to put it all together. Ready? 1, and back, and 2, and switch sides, 1, and back, 2. So the front leg roundhouse kick follows about the same rules as the skip roundhouse kick when it comes to power. And even though it doesn't have a full pivot like the back leg roundhouse kick, there still is a pivot that happens. Even from a more defensive position, you can still pivot a little bit here, and it can range all the way to having no pivot, just lifting and flicking. None of them are right or wrong, they all have their uses in different contexts. If the situation calls for a front leg roundhouse kick and it's a nice open shot and I can really dig in some power, okay, I might set my hips back. Maybe I'm dodging and turning a last second headshot and I'm already turned over, but the counter shot is there. I might not be in a position to pivot anymore, so I might just have to flick it out. Or I might be somewhere in the middle, okay? I might be a little bit more defensive, but maybe I can squeeze out a 15-degree turn with my pivot here and my front leg attacking. So when you're practicing front leg roundhouse kick, know that there's kind of a gradient of how much power you can put in and how to adjust your body position to make those adjustments. We're going to do 10 alternating sides. So after I do my 2 kicks, take a step back and turning step back. Okay, and we'll automatically switch sides. All right, my count, ready. 1, step and turning step. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Good. Skip roundhouse, back leg roundhouse. I'm gonna take one big step back to reset, and my legs are already switched. All right, we're gonna do 10, my count, ready. 1, skip roundhouse, back leg roundhouse. I'm gonna take one big step back. Here we go, 2, skip, and back leg. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Good. Next, we're going to reverse that. So we're going to start with the back leg roundhouse kick, and we're going to practice following up with the skipping motion. Ready? 1, turning, and skip. Let's take a big step back, other leg. 2, turning, skip. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Good. So now that we have some handle on front leg striking with the roundhouse kick, we can incorporate that into different combinations or movement patterns, incorporating that with footwork. Thank you for learning and training with me. I'll see you guys next time.